All right, well, it's 1 o'clock Eastern Time. I'd like to thank you and welcome you to coming to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software. Pleased to be presenting here with Dion McCormick, no relation. Today, as always, Dion will go over some topics of his own choosing at the beginning of the session, and then after that, he'll get into your questions. Two things you should know. Copies of these recordings can be found at videos.alphasoftware.com. Also, go ahead and at any point go ahead and type in your questions. Questions are what make these sessions interesting, lively, and keep them going and keep them informative. So you can go ahead and do that by typing your questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar interface. So anyway, let's get started. Hello, Dion. Are you there?
Yes, indeed. Am I coming through?
You are coming through, and I can see your screen.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dave. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. First and foremost, we are here to help you. So help us by looking at your GoToWebinar control panel. If you have questions that we can cover, if you could type those into the question area, Dave will be eagerly and focused on monitoring that and making sure that we get those questions in the loop so we can try and answer them today. In fact, I want to give a shout out and thank you in terms of I'm going to do a quick early presentation before we get into questions, and this was actually based upon a question that came from one of our fabulous attendees. They had a question about emails, and I'm going to try and address that a bit, but it's really helpful for us, for you to give us a heads up. You can always send that to guides@alphasoftware.com, and Dave is monitoring that also really closely, so we can queue those up to help out. We'll be going over that today, so we look forward to seeing more and more of your questions in the future. With that, again, take the time. If you have questions for today, put them into your GoToWebinar control panel in the questions area. We'll try and answer that, and we'll go from there. My name is Dion McCormick. I'm the Senior Solutions Engineer for Alpha. Help both new people onboarding, but also help people to figure out how to accomplish their business objectives using the Alpha platform. Gets more and more fun every day with all the new capabilities that are coming out to support people building very sophisticated and very interesting applications using Alpha. Very cool area. But one of the key areas that people often use is email. Email is a critical element of the communication. Obviously, more and more people are moving to social networks, but hey, for things like security and having a record of who people are, email can't be beat. So we had a question that came in from a user that said, well, there's kind of different ways you can do email, both client side, you can handle it either through code or you could do it through Action JavaScript, and there's some variations to it. So we thought we'd take a little time here to kind of go through and talk a bit about the whole email area and talk a little bit about what are the different methods, the different ways you can interact and deal with email, and more importantly is what are the pros and cons of each, and to open up some new ideas that you may not have had about how to use email within your applications from that standpoint. So to kind of get started on it, the important thing to first realize is that email is really handled on the app server side. Now, with the advent of PhoneGap, there's newer capabilities for you to interact with the clients on a local basis, but what we're focusing on here is really server-side email, things that are occurring where you're triggering emails to be sent out from your application on the server side. And so you'll see that basically you may have someone in the field on a web browser or a phone or something like that. They're going to do an interaction with that, and then it's going to trigger a behavior on the Alpha app server, application server, that then will transfer data to an SMTP server, and that is for outgoing email. Now, Alpha has the ability to read POP email accounts, meaning that you can actually write a routine to go out and read email through a POP3, and I'm not going to cover that today, but that's completely capable. I'm more thinking and talking about the outbound capability for our presentation today. And SMTP, for people who are kind of new to that area, is its Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. It's basically a standard protocol for putting a mail message to be delivered in a SMTP server. So the SMTP server is actually what's responsible for seeking out and delivering that email to the client's email server on that side. But what we do is we can transfer the data over to that and handle it. And I'll talk a little bit more. There's some really cool ways you can handle this to make that a two-way communication versus just throwing things out in the wild, and I'll cover that in a few minutes. So again, you have either a person working in a web browser or on a client or a mobile device or a desktop web. They're making requests. The app server says, oh yeah, we need to send this email out, and then it goes to this SMTP server from Alpha to actually deliver the message there. So one thing it's very important for you to understand, and I'll show you an example of it, is that there's a couple different ways, and when I get into a little bit of the code piece the next few minutes, I'll explain it. But there are these concept of email profiles. So what you can do is on your Alpha app server, you can actually set up what's called an email profile. And that profile basically describes and has the information of how to reach the SMTP server. So the cool thing about setting up a profile is once it's set up on the server, then your code can be very simple because you're just saying use that profile. You don't actually have to tell it all the details about the SMTP server. You can just say, hey, use this profile, and you can have multiple profiles. So if you have a situation where you want to have multiple different ways to deliver email, you could set that up from there. And that's often confusing for people. It's like, where are these profiles? Where do I set them up? So I'm going to spend a few moments showing you how to do that, or just show you where to find that from that standpoint. So again, the client triggers something. The Alpha app server either has embedded in there the information about the SMTP server, or it looks at its profiles and picks out a profile that you've designated to get that information. It's basically the address information for this SMTP server. And the beauty is that it takes care of the rest for you. Basically, you create the email, you tell it how you want it delivered, i.e. where SMTP, and off to the races it goes. So one other thing I like to let people know about is that you can use any SMTP server. So for instance, I have a Yahoo account. Yahoo has SMTP. Google. I mean, every provider of email has a POP3 for you getting email from the server and then SMTP to go out. But there's another option I like to let people know about it, is that we have also, is that, let me see here, is that, oh, yeah, anyway, there is a technology or a company called Mandrill, and they're actually owned by MailChimp. And basically they're an SMTP provider, meaning they just have a bunch of SMTP servers. But there's a couple cool things about Mandrill that I like to let people know, and I kind of prefer it because A, it's a very high reliable SMTP server environment, meaning that they are built to send out MailChimp, and if you know, it's a massive email marketing tool. So you have thousands and thousands of people sending out emails all the time. But there's a couple other things I like about Mandrill. One is that it's tightly integrated into Alpha. We already have the ability to talk to Mandrill, so you basically get a key from Mandrill and you're done. Very, very simple to do it. But also what Mandrill has, which I like, is it has, in my mind, a much easier and more extensive way to monitor what happens to that email. Because with a traditional SMTP server, you kind of send it over and then it's responsible for delivering it. With Mandrill, there are methods and ways in which you can actually see how that email has been delivered, whether it got bounced, when it got delivered. You can actually even detect clicks inside emails and things like that. So the cool thing about Mandrill, and I'm not going to go into much more detail today, but I want you to be aware of it, is that Mandrill allows you to have much better visibility into the mail delivery process. And also really cool is have that two-way communication, so you can actually say, okay, I'm sending out an email to this person. Did they actually click on the link to then go back to my web page to fulfill what I sent that email out for? So you can start deriving statistics on that. Very, very cool, very, very fun. So, and very easy to implement inside Alpha. So I'll touch on it, but I want you guys to be aware of there's a really cool service out there, and they're very inexpensive. I think it's like 25,000 first emails a month are included, you know, and from there. So it's really a reasonable level of service that they are offering, and a very powerful one at that. Okay, so that is kind of the lay of the land. So what I want to do is dive in and show you a few different little things. So first is I want to explain that there's kind of two primary ways you can trigger an email. And one is through Action JavaScript, which is very straightforward, and I'll show you that in a few moments. The other is you can actually create XBasic scripts to actually do email. And there'll be a third one coming out sooner, is really you're going to be able to use Node.js to do that communication. But we're a little ahead of the curve, so I don't want to go down that road yet. But that will also be another option in which you'll be able to trigger emails to go out. So the first thing I want to do is focus on Action JavaScript. So in a moment, I'm going to jump over into my development environment. For people who are new to Alpha, bear with us. This is our Alpha development environment. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and just create a new component by clicking on the New button here in the left-hand corner. I'm going to click on Web Component, click Next. Now, as you can see, I have a wide range of different controls. The one I'm going to actually create today is a UX control, which is a form. But as you can see, we have a very rich set of controls that allow you to develop some really neat and interesting solutions. So I'm going to click the UX. And as we've shown before, we have a whole bunch of different pre-built templates. I'm just going to click OK, and I'm going to create a blank one for right now. So on the left, we have our controls. In the middle, we have our layout, and then the properties will show up. So I'm going to do something very simple, is that all I want to do is add a button to my user interface here. And I'm going to call Send Email. Okay? So this email button right here is has no behavior on it yet, so I've just added a sort of an empty button to my user interface. Doesn't do anything. But now I can go down here and I can go to the click event. So I've gone to the JavaScript touch mouse pointer events and the click event. And so I want to add a behavior to this button to send an email. So I click on the 3 ellipses. It opens up the Action JavaScript Builder, which is our way to add behaviors without having to know a bunch of JavaScript. So I'm going to click Add New Action. I'm going to bring up there. So you can see I have a ton of different ones here, but I'm going to go ahead and type in email. I could have also clicked over here, email, and you'll notice that there's a pre-built Action JavaScript for sending an email. And then I can click on that and click OK here in the right-hand corner. Great, so now I'm at a Genie. So basically it says, great, so when a person clicks on this button, you want to send an email. So how do you want to send that? Okay, so the first thing I've got an option here is, do I want to use internal, i.e., do I want to use those default parameters, use the alpha? If that's true, I just leave it there and then I'll show you there. Second, though, is I have my mandrel option. And in this case, it's going to ask for a mandrel key, and then I just give it a single key value, and boom, it will talk to mandrel and off to the races. That's another reason I like mandrel, is that it just works. If you have that key, when you get an account, you get a key code. When you have that key code, you're done. I found that sometimes SMTP can be a little touchy, so let's go back to the internal. So what it's first saying is, well, do you want to use the default email settings? And again, I'll show you in a minute on the app server. Let me go back here just so I'm kind of giving you perspective on it. Is on the app server, you will set up a profile there, and therefore you can go ahead and just say use the default one, and therefore when the Alpha App Server actually runs this Action JavaScript, it says, oh, okay, I'm going to look up in the server, get my default email profile, and then use that information to then connect to my SMTP server. And so you kind of preset that up from there. It makes life a little simpler there. But you don't have to. You can click that, and then now you can go in here and literally go in and set your server name, your username, and password. So if you don't want to use the profile on there, you're not required, you can actually encode it. Now the downside of that is that if you're going to create 5 of these buttons, you have to go in and set these for every one of those buttons. And more importantly is that if something changes, you have to move SMTP servers, you have to go back and change every one in your system. So that becomes somewhat of maintenance. So we recommend you use the default email settings, because then you set it once on the server and you're done. So now I'm going to skip the .NET. You can use .NET. I really haven't seen a reason for that. Maybe someone can pipe in if they know, but I've really not used that in there. So now you put in who the email is from, the alias of who it is, the subject, the send to, etc., and off to the races from there. You can store the messages in an outbox, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But also we have here something called send when, immediate or add to work queue, and I'll come back and talk about that a little bit later. And then you have confirmation messages. So this is the method for using a Action JavaScript. As you can see, you can either use mandrel if you'd like. You could use the server-side default app, or you could custom code yours or explicitly put them in here. And then the rest is here. And by the way, this information can be populated from your form. So I'm not going to show that right now, but all of this data in here, like for instance this, could be information from your form. So you can actually take data that people have put into your form and actually add it to from that standpoint there. And very straightforward. This is a neat way just to get started with email, because if you don't want to go ahead and set up the server and do everything else, you just say, set this up here, and you can literally use it in working preview and start sending emails right inside your development environment because you've put these pieces in there. Plus, it also allows you to confirm that you have all your SMTP server data. Once you've set it up and it connects to the server, you're golden. But I found it can be a little touchy in terms of making sure you have everything set up right, the right login, the right port for the server, whether it's using SSL. That's where, again, if you're starting and you don't mind, go with Mandrill, your life becomes super easy because all you have to put in is one key and you're done. Okay, so that is how you set up a Action JavaScript there. And so in this situation on the client mobile, we put in a button with Action JavaScript. It triggers that. It uses the app server or Mandrill to do that, and off to the races there. But as we talked about it, there's another way. So if you want more control, you want to do things a little bit fancier. The second method is using XBasic. So let's go ahead and go into the XBasic side and talk about that. And this will require familiarity with scripting. So again, for newbies, use the Action JavaScript. It's all point and click, change. You can do it right there. Works great, simple. Once you get a little bit more sophisticated, you may want to do a couple more fancy things. This is where the XBasic side comes in here. So don't get stressed out, but I want to kind of show you how you can create a simple email using XBasic. So the first thing I'm doing here, and I'll walk you through this code step by step, is I'm creating a pointer array. And a pointer is just, think of it as an object where you would have a thing and you could have different attributes to it. So for instance, once I've created that pointer, I can say, okay, I want to add to that pointer my send to. So this is who I'm sending that email to. Then I also can do a CC and a BCC. So basically I'm building up the information about what I'm going to send, who I'm sending it to. Then I'm also putting in here using the MS dot, that's the nomenclature, so it's saying use this pointer and add from email. You put in the email information there. Then you put in the subject, the HTML, the text, and then any attachments that you may want to use. That's a really cool feature, is Alpha can handle attachments. So for instance, let's say you've created a PDF and you want to email that out to a client, you can do that. You basically use this mechanism to create the PDF, know where that one or many attachments are, and Alpha is going to take care of grabbing all that information and sending it over to the SMTP server for you. And once you've done this once and have it working, it's child's play from that standpoint there. So what I'm basically doing here, just to let you know, is I'm building up sort of my message package, who I'm sending it to, what I'm sending, including any attachments and the subject and the message there. And then once that's ready to go, and process check, am I coming through okay, Dave? I got a little bouncy icon.
Yeah, but you're coming through.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Just want to make sure. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so now then I can say email sent. So basically once I've built up this MS, that message, then I can then send the message. And actually I think I have the wrong code here. Wait a second here. I'm sorry. All we have to do now is in email send is basically take this MS record here and just say email send MS, and then it will go off the races. And it will send that to it. So it's a very simple script. And I'll show you a little bit better one with Mandrill in the next few moments to kind of show you the same idea. But the idea is you build up the message using this methodology, and then you just use a built-in function call that will send that message, that package out for you. And then the server takes care of it from there. Now, if we were going to do a Mandrill, we do a very similar method. In fact, it looks exactly the same. But in this case, what we do is we go email _ send _ Mandrill. We give it the secret key that only you know, and that MS, and therefore that message package is sent over to Mandrill, and it processes it from there. So as you can see, it only takes a few lines of codes to actually create messages in XBasic and be able to deliver those to the system, to the SMTP system. And this is a little bit more advanced. I would say definitely start with the Action JavaScripting. Once you're comfortable with that, then move into doing the XBasic stuff. The benefit is that, for instance, let's say this send to right here. I could actually write a little piece of script that looks up into a database and pulls out a distribution list and then comes back here and then populates that information here in this situation. So it allows you more sophisticated manipulation and preparation for email message when you're using XBasic. And this could be done as an XBasic callback and other methods to do that from that standpoint there. Now, I want to scroll down a little bit more. There's one other method I want to talk about, and I'm not going to go into much detail, but I want to talk about the ability for you to do this. And it takes a lot more sort of effort to put, but if you have a high volume environment, and you may want to look at this. Alpha has built into it, and if I go back here to my Action JavaScript, you'll notice here send when, there are two options, immediate or add to work queue. And this is where it comes in from there. So the idea is I can either have the app server call that SMTP server immediately the moment they click that button, package up the email, give it to the SMTP server, and then have it process it. But the other option is that I can place that into what is our technology called the work queue, and then within the work queue is periodically can be talking to the SMTP server. Now, just to be upfront, is that you have to kind of manage this process here. So there's some other bells and whistles that you need to put in there. But there's one big benefit from that. And the following is that when I connect from the app server to the SMTP server, I kind of put everything on hold, meaning the system will wait till it talks to the SMTP server. And so if you're sending a bunch of really large files or something like that, then it could be a little bit before you get a response back. And therefore, you may have a situation where the user says, well, I clicked the button and then it just seems like it hung or something like that. So for large kind of in volumes where you're going to maybe send out a lot of emails or do a lot of things like that, it may make more sense to do in a work queue versus that direct connection to the SMTP server. For most messages, if it's just simple text, boom, unless you get big network latency, going directly to the SMTP server is the way to go. But if you are having a situation where you have high volume, very large, very high level of complexity in terms of your attachments, you may want to investigate it. And there's a great video in our video library that actually walks you through how all that works. And again, beyond the scope of today's message, I just want you to be aware from that. Works out really well. Another reason I like Mandrill is they do have very high response times, meaning they have built their servers to be able to take emails and send them out lightning fast because of the sheer volumes they work with from that standpoint. So again, something to know, be aware of, look at down the road. And I'm sure when we get into Node.js and that becomes more prevalent later in the year, there'll be a third option to be able to have to offload the actual delivery of mail to a node process. But again, beyond the scope of today's message or discussion from there. So again, remember, there are two primary, I wanted to show you one other thing, and then I'll get into the questions there. So let me go ahead, and I'm launching my remote desktop, and I'm going to go up onto my, my server. So what I'm doing is I'm remoting in to my absolutely fabulous ZebraHost Alpha server. That's zebrahost.net. Great people, really know Alpha, makes your life simple, gets things up and running in literally no time at all. So I'm up on my server here, and I had a refresh, so it's redoing all that there. So let me go ahead and do this. Let's see, it's going to give me an error, but bear it. So once my server is running up on the server, once my server is up there, then you'll notice that right down here in the what is that called? The taskbar or toolbar or notification bar for Windows, you'll see there's a little icon there. Now, normally yours will say green. I use Always Up, so I'm using the Always Up technology to keep things running. But you'll notice in here, if I right-click on it, you'll see a button or a item here that says Email Settings. And this is where I go to set up those profiles on the server. So you'll notice that I have a default setting right here. I can add multiple profiles, and I'm not limited to one, but the default one is the most important. And then you go through the account and you set up all the information in terms of what. So for instance, in this case, I've set up this server, so it's using my Yahoo account to do that. But you set up the receiving, the sending, and the other pieces there. And there's some great videos and great content online that walks you through how to set these pieces up from this standpoint here. But once I have set this default up and the server's good to go, then anytime inside of my code or my action JavaScript, I say use the default SMTP server, it will then use this profile that I've set up here. So an important thing is that when you go to deploy your application and you're using email and you're using the default, make sure you've gone in here. And the cool thing about this is that I can actually test this right here, so I can make sure that my settings are correct before I even launch my application. So it's going to test my email settings, and oh, I guess I have to update my email. I don't send many emails off this. But you'll see I can immediately say, hey, do I have everything set up here? So all of a sudden I don't put my app up there and things aren't working. Once this says, yeah, oh, good to go, I'm logging in, everything's working, boom, the rest works smooth as silk, super easy and done from there. So again, where you go is you log onto your app server, you find the control panel and you go to email settings, and then you set up your profile there. Note to self, fix my profile for future emails. And that is what I wanted to cover on that. So let me go ahead and exit out of that. Okay, and I'm back here. And so that is email. As you can see, very rich, very powerful, very easy. Once you got everything set up, especially if you're using Mandrill or those, then the actual code is very simple to put there. And so one of the questions that really came from the person is, well, what are the pros and the cons of both of them? And really the pro of the doing it with Action JavaScript is that you can kind of just do it right there on the screen. There's no scripting, no coding. The other thing is immediate gratification is once you set it up on there, you can immediately test it and see if your email's going out and if your emails are coming in, etc. from that standpoint. The downside of that is that if you're going to do more sophisticated things, like you're going to be doing lookups to find like the distribution list of who the person should go to, you're doing like compiling and building reports in PDF, then you're going to want to start sliding towards using the XBasic methodology, because you can script a very sophisticated method to build that email message up to send out to the outside world. So I would really kind of stick as far as you could with Action JavaScript, but once you've kind of reached the extent of what you can do with Action JavaScript and that that capability there, then you dip your toe in there. And again, you're going to find out this is probably the best script right here. As you can see, once you get the profile or the pattern of how to do this, it works over and over, very simple there. And then the last but not least is you just have to make sure you understand what is the volume of what you're doing. And if you're getting into high density, high volume, high large attachment side, you'll start seeing delays because there's just a certain amount of time it takes for the app server to talk to the SMTP server, get the information over there, confirm everything went over there okay, and then the SMT sends it out, but then you may have a slight delay on your side. So you may want to look at if that's starting to happen more and more as investigate the work queue processor. So that's a quick and dirty overview of email. I hope that's beneficial. If you have questions about this or other things, please go to your GoToWebinar control panel and put your questions in the questions area. And Dave, all yours. You can answer questions about that or
excellent. Thank you very much, Dion. A couple of things I'd like to point out on emails that we do have a email project, an email demo that uses both SMTP and Mandrill, and it's available at our GitHub account. So if you go into the chat section, it'll show you I put two links. The first one doesn't work. Use the second one, github.com/alphaanywhere, and you'll see the alpha email demo there, so you can go ahead and download that. Second thing is, for those of you who have been using Gmail, I know when I first started using Gmail, I was trying to use the email send function. I was having all kinds of issues. Turns out Alpha has written a special XBasic function just for using Gmail. It's called email_send_Gmail. And I put that in the chat window as well. So you might want to check that out.
Thank you, Dave. Great follow-up.
Now, we have a bunch of questions, but please go ahead and feel free to add some more to our questions queue. Let me go with this one here, and this has to do with the security framework, and it has to do with how do you manage a forgotten password? Sort of perhaps an email-related question.
Point. Great point. Well, I'm going to go back into my development environment, and by the way, forgotten password, everything we talked about, email, make sure you have set up correctly.
Exactly. Yep.
You're going to need that, So what we talked about, actually, it's very good timing. Whoever put that in, we want to say thank you really for doing that. Now, what's great about this is that I'm back in my development system. I'm going to create a new component, and in this case, I'm going to use a specific component called the login component. So we already have a pre-made in our security framework. We already have a component that has the ability to log you into the system, and it's really a nice little component. Say no. Do I have my login here? Cats. I might need to go like this and enable the security. Let's go ahead and just click OK. Yeah, no, I haven't set it up here. Okay, hold on a second. Let me think. How would I do that? I wonder if I have a login component already on here. No, it's not there. We have a pre-made component, and built into the login component is actually, man, I'll have to enable security on this for future demonstrations there. Let me go ahead and let me see if I have, which one you, oh yeah, no, you know what, I think I might. Hold on here. Let's see.
We did a webinar just about security once upon a time, maybe.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So a little while ago, though. Yep.
No, I don't have it in that one. I don't have it there. Darn. Anyway, that said, I apologize. And I can go over it next week. I can make sure it's set up properly. The login component has integrated password recovery. And so when you select the login component, you can enable or disable it. And in its combination, so let me go ahead and go back into my demonstration environment. Let me go into my web security. I'm going to enable, it's not fully, but you'll see here data recovery options, okay? So, for instance, can I allow them to update or recover a user ID? And therefore, they have to put in there. So the login component works in conjunction with the security settings to set up the behavior. So often people are like, if you don't have your ID, call the company and find it out, but usually your ID is your email address or something like that. But also it allows you lost password action, and it allows you to reset or recover your password. Now, the cool thing about that is that once you've set this here, let's say it's recover password, don't do show on screen, don't like that, send an email to the user. And then again, notice it's asking me, well, what's the inside, the mail, Mandrill? Do I want to use a specific profile, or do I want to set it somewhere else? So what you do is you use the login component, and based on your settings here in the data recovery options, it will show a link saying, oh, recover password. It will ask you for the user ID. It then will then send the person an email with their password, and it could be either recover a password where it sends a password, or it says reset the password. So there's a couple different methods there. And this might be a good way to go through this down the road as another one, but I apologize I couldn't show the login component, but the great thing about the login component is that it's aware of these settings, so depending on what you set the policy for how that's going to work, the login component will take care of it for you.
Excellent. Here's a question that was emailed in to guides@alphasoftware.com, and remember you could always do that when we're not in session. And this one, I like this question because it's one that I often forget quite the syntax for. But I was just wondering if you could sort of review the use in XBasic of those tags that go like less than %A5 and then you type something in, or less than % text, or less than %JS, or less than %code. Like what are the options there, and why do you use them?
Interesting. Okay, so we're talking about if I'm
So it's
mistaken.
an XBasic syntax question, really, I guess is the.
Okay.
But it could be in an A5W page as well. Certainly.
Yeah, let me go ahead and open up. I'm opening up. I'm jumping around. I apologize. This is the legacy control panel, the original control panel, and in here I can create little test script XBasic, which I use for doing testing email, doing other things like that. Very nice to be able to have create these little scripts, but this could also equally apply inside of an A5W page. So I'm going to create a script, and I think it's dim hello as string OSC hello is equal to. Is that what they're asking about?
That's exactly it.
Piece?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yep. So this, I love this functionality. This is really, really powerful functionality because Let me show you an example of how to do that. I said, okay, so let's say I'm doing something pretty interesting. I'm saying, this is my cool message, and I want to have multiple lines. Okay, so problem is that, even if I put the in parentheses here, this syntax is wrong. See, notice it's being highlighted. There's a problem there. So, a simple string is usually one message. So instead what I can do is this. I can go in here and go string. You'll notice that it put in a left caret, percent string percent. And then what I can do here is copy this, put it right there, and you'll notice what it's done is it treats everything from this starting position to this ending position as this information here. And so therefore you can put in full paragraphs or whatever you want to do there. Now, there are a couple different variants of that. If you'll notice that we have string, text, XML, JSON. The reason we have these different ones here is that the system then understands what's inside that string, and the one that's really, really important is the HTML. So now when I put in BR, notice what's going on when I put the HTML. Let me go ahead and show you how that would work here. Okay, so let's say I create this, and let's start over, and I go, okay, hello is equal to string, and I go, this is a test. Now, I want to actually have that as HTML markup. So in this case, I'm going to go /b for bold and //b. Okay, great, works. If you put this on a web page, it's going to make the text in between these two tags bold. But you'll notice it really didn't give me any help. But now check this out. Go hello is equal to HTML, and I go / check what happens. It knows that what I'm about to type in there is going to be HTML. So therefore, it automatically triggers my HTML lookup, or look sense, I don't know what you want to call it, autocomplete there. So I can go B, see bold text, and notice what it did. Then I can say this is a test. Now I know I syntactically have a better piece of HTML. I could do it this way. There's nothing wrong with that. But this gives me all the benefits of putting okay, div, okay, and then this, I've got all the helpers, ID equals hello, and the style is equal to background, star 2222. So as you can see, by knowing what's inside this, and the same thing works here, so I can go down here and say hello is equal to, say, JSON, and then it understands what's inside there should be JSON, so it helps you. So that's the difference between the different variants, is that you're just telling the alpha development environment what's the plan. Like, for instance, I'm actually, what I'm going to put inside that area there so that it can help me through my process. And so it's just helper functions there. So I tend to use mainly star string star, or I guess it's percent strings percent, and the HTML one. Haven't played so much, but check this out. This one's kind of cool. Let's say I want to build a little piece of JavaScript. I can go var x equals 1. It knows that what's inside there is JavaScript and can behave accordingly, kind of scenario. So really helpful from that standpoint there. But you can see it kind of color codes it. It puts the little blue B for that because it has the helpers. Really helpful. And as you start to do more sophisticated things like JSON, we talked about it a month or so ago. If you start doing what's called templating with JSON and HTML, this kind of capability will really help you out as you get into it. Although more and more we use the JSON template tool to kind of create this text here, so you can actually see it running live versus having to kind of type it here and then run it a few times. And as Dave mentioned right here, all this stuff right here, let me go ahead and copy this here and copy that. If I go into a A5W page here, I create a new A5W page, blank page, and I go right here and I say insert XBasic up here at top. I paste that code in right there, and then I go hello. Okay, so what I did was I opened up a blank HTML5 or A5W page. I clicked the Insert X Basic, and you'll notice it. All it did is it took my stuff and it put it in what are called script. So this says Start Alpha's script, and then down here it says in that script. So now I'll go like this. So basically I'm saying, and just so this isn't confusing, I'll just say, okay, so I've created a variable hello. I've said it's HTML. And now what I'm going to do is that little question mark just says, take whatever's in it, hello, and spit it out. So I can go to live preview, and hopefully you'll see there is as a test. So basically it took the HTML that I created here, and it spit it out. So I could put in something else here. I could go header 1, header. Okay, so I put a little piece of Java or HTML there. I run it, and you'll notice that header is right there. So that's how you can use that inside of an A5W page. It basically just runs this script. But as you can see, I can kind of real time, and I could do things like look up data in databases and then spit this stuff out. The sky's the limit. So hopefully that gives a little bit more flavor of what those different things are, how they are used, and how you would apply it within your system.
That's excellent. Thank you. If you could just go back to the control panel, the classic control panel, not the web projects control panel.
Sure.
We had a question earlier which said, I'm getting along great in Alpha Anywhere, but I noticed there's this tools menu. I was wondering if you could sort of take me on a quick little tour, maybe explain what's going on in there. Yeah, because it looks like there's a whole bunch of cool stuff, but what does it do? Yeah.
Yeah. First is make sure you select everything on that just for fun and see what happens. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Why not?
And what I would do is before you do that is zip up your workspace using this first one, then do it, then you can unzip it. Okay, so remember, the legacy of Alpha is that it came from a desktop paradigm, meaning it was really meant as a desktop, it was built as a desktop database development tool. So some of these things are carryovers of the days when things were more done on a desktop basis and pieces there. So one I use a lot actually is Zip Workspace. If I click on that one, all this is going to do is it's going to open up a control panel in a moment. It will. Oh, that's still going. There we go. Okay. So what it does is it says take all of your files and put them into a single zip. So it takes your whole project, zips it up into a zip file, and then you can send it to someone else and they unzip it. And that includes the complete hierarchy. It includes everything that's involved with this. And this is really handy from a backup. Sometimes when I'm doing things, I'll just do a zip and zip this up. Now you could do it at the desktop. You could just right-click on the folder that contains your solution, but it's built in here. And then there's some things like it will compact the files and some other pieces there that are handy from that standpoint here. So it's just a really easy way to archive basically your solution, and I've used that multiple times. The tools, and again I'm reaching these being on the control panel, tools send workspace does something very similar, but it will actually email, if I'm not mistaken, the whole zip file out, and I really have never used that because I just usually put it on a Dropbox and share it with someone else. But this allows you to do the same function but then send the files, and then they'll send them out via HTTP or via SMTP to someone else that they need from that standpoint there. Okay, so now we have create shortcut. I don't ever use that. I think it's
That's because you're not a desktop guy.
I'm not a desktop guy, so
that's
you
for
have
creating
to
a
ask
desktop shortcut for a Windows application, not typically used for web or mobile applications.
Nah, exactly. So moving along, you have backup, restore, very similar to Workspace, is that you can do backups of the workspace. What I'm seeing, the reason these are, I guess, less important now, they're available to you, is that if you're going to be doing any kind of multi-user, you're not going to be zipping files and sending them back. You're going to probably set up a Git account and use version control to coordinate between two people. But that's available here. So this allows you to back up the database and see your log of the backup. And again, this was traditionally more desktop-oriented kind of scenario because in the old, in the olden days, I got to be careful because I lived in those olden days. Is that this would be not only managing a development environment, but would actually be possibly managing a live running alpha solution that other people are connecting to in the network. So there's these things built in there. That's where you get into things like network optimized. That's kind of doing some things to make it so that the system would work well within a network solution. But again, not really relevant to web and mobile solutions. We have security. You could set a workspace password when you log in. The development system will require that you put in a password. Again, kind of historically, you may be running this app server, or not app server, but you may be running this database on a network machine, and you're the only one who should be able to open it up and modify it, etc. from that standpoint. We have email. You can send and read email within here. Alpha at one time was really heavy in terms of using Alpha as a tool to enable email and improve it here. Add-in manager, I haven't done that a lot, but I guess there's really, that was again traditionally desktop add-in managers. I think there was like a mailer tool, some other things that you could add into it.
Yep.
You have utilities, and again, these are, again, desktop, things like runtime user count and freeform report conversion, things like that. Don't really use that a whole lot. You have your development server. When you click on that, this opens up basically the server that's running on your local development machine. You can access it there, but what I do is I usually just go to web development server here on the web project control panel, sends me to the same location. But you can set what your server port is, your other variables of what the server is running on the development machine, not the app server, for instance, I showed you a little bit a while ago. Okay, so I'll go in here and I'll go back into the control panel. Web projects just takes me to the web projects control panel. It shows it or doesn't show it. And that's where originally this was your primary control panel when you used Alpha, and then the web projects control panel became when you started doing web stuff in like the V9 or something like that, V9 or V10. I'm not sure when they introduced that, but what we find is now you almost spend 99% of your time on the web project control panel.
Would you believe me if I told you version 6 is when that was introduced?
My bad.
There you go.
You know,
just a little bit of trivia.
Yes. I think Clinton was still president at the point we were.
Lincoln was still president, I think, at that point. Yeah.
I know. Okay, we have a bunch of built-in PDF. I've always liked the ability for Alpha to handle PDFs. So it's got built-in PDF tools. Again, a bit of this is all a bit of a legacy of the desktop operations, but it's available. They kind of moved it all into XBasic Action JavaScript, and also in XBasic calls for you to do this.
But one kind of cool thing there in PDF tools is Linearize. And Linearize will take a PDF document and manipulate it in such a way that, especially for a big document, that when you're trying to look at it online, it sends what the browser needs first. So we could start looking at the document before the entire document has been loaded down. It's kind of a neat thing if you have a giant document. Sort of an oddball tool to have in Alpha, but it's there if you need it.
Handy, handy. We have external databases. This basically accesses, for instance, your Alpha DAO connection strings. You can actually create a SQL table within here, meaning that you can launch this, tell it connection, and it will create that. We also have our Query Genie and other pieces. So you have these tools in there a lot. Nowadays, people tend to use Toad or external SQL management studios just because they're very rich. But don't ignore the fact that if you need to do something very quickly, especially I like the Database Explorer, you can actually open that up and immediately look at a connection string and, for instance, see what are the tables, what are the different types of fields and their values and the other pieces of things along those lines. And you can look at multiple ones there. Okay, so let's go back here to external databases. If you've already created connection strings in other app, you could bring those into here. Let's say you have another project. You don't want to have to go through and create the whole. You can actually import a connection string, which is a pointer to a database, and then edit it from there. You can edit the connection strings. This is where you can go in and create those connections to yours. And just to give people a heads up again, what's really exciting about it is that you may not see this, but because I've got a little bit of a pre-release one, but now we're starting to put in not only the SQL databases, but file APIs, software as a system APIs, database as a service APIs, NoSQL, and then SQL APIs, which are what we traditionally work with. So more and more, as you do more web services, you'll be using this to encapsulate those web services to use them just like any other data source. So that's in there. Let's see what else we got here. Workspace upsize genie. This is a situation where you can take and build take native DBF files and move them into SQL, and it does it all for you automatically.
So for those of you who used Alpha
yeah.
5 before, you said, wow, I'd really like to bring that to the web, but I'd prefer not to use DBFs on the web. I'd prefer to use SQL tables. That's what this was for. It was to take your DBF, everything, and do all of the work for you and convert it into SQL. It's kind of a neat thing, and it does work pretty well, so having used it myself.
Yeah. Indeed, indeed. It walks you through, creates all the tables, everything you need there. Okay, and then I think we also have feature packs. And this is where what feature packs are is basically special codes. And since Alpha's gone to a subscription basis now, this is less relevant. But sometimes if you're ever doing something and you're going to be using something way ahead of the curve, right. It may not be in the pre-release build. You may need to not have what's called a feature code. And basically it's a little code that unlocks some functionality that may not be ready for prime time that you're able to use it. And use this here to add the new feature, paste the special little code, and then it would activate this in the system. And that's really for stuff that's kind of way ahead of the curve, really not so much used out in the outside world for there. So that's your tools menu there.
Thank you very much. Yep.
You're welcome.
We have about 10 minutes left. So here's a question that I think we can cover in that time, which is this person wants to ensure that a field in a grid only accepts a unique value or a unique entry. So he doesn't want duplicates.
Excellent. I love it. I'm going to save this one. That's kind of cool. I'll go demo HTML script. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my web projects control panel. I am going to create a new component, in this case a web component. I'm going to select grid. Okay. Now remember we have a whole bunch of pre-made templates, but I'm just going to create with a blank. So the first thing you need to do is you tell it where you're getting data from. We're creating a grid component here. Oops, sorry. So I'm going to click select, hit connection. That points me to my database, and when I hit connect, confirms that I'm connected there. Now it's asking me what do I want to display in this grid. I click select for table, let's say a set of customers, and I click OK. Then I can apply a filter if I can click order by. Now that I've selected where I'm getting my data from, I can go to the Fields tab, and in the Fields tab basically it shows me all my fields, so I can start selecting some fields. And let's go ahead and make this editable. So I'm going to select all and click. So this is an editable grid here. And so if I walk and go into working preview, I now have an editable grid. I can go do everything I want to here and save that data. It's all fully hooked up. You'll notice it's got the little save changes. I can reset the changes. All that's done for you automatically there. So that's how you create a grid. Now the question was, oh, now I need to ensure that this contact title has a unique value. So the way I would approach that is using validation XBasic. Now, let me take a moment here. There are validation rules, and I'm going to go ahead and open that up. This is, for instance, do I require a value? And if I require a value, do I allow letters, white space, digits, etc.? And maybe I need it to be a certain length. It has to be a certain length. And so this is a very straightforward kind of instant, like, hey, if you're typing something in there, it can't have characters, it can't have special characters, things like that. But it really doesn't do something like to guarantee uniqueness of a value within a table. So instead of that, what I can do is I can go to the validation XBasic. And how the validation XBasic works is this, is that I double click on it, and now in here I can put a set of XBasic code to validate this field. And you'll notice that the data for the current row is e.data. So for instance, in this one, contact title, I can say e.data.contact title, and this will give me the value that the person put in contact table there. And now what I can do is, in fact, I can then write a script script to see if it is in the table. Okay. Now you could do the whole thing where you set up a connection and everything else, but I'm going to go ahead and cheat here, and I'm going to use the SQL lookup function. Okay. So it's pretty cool. There's a little function built into Alpha called SQL lookup. So what I can do is, and I'm probably getting a little too deep, but bear with me for everybody. All I do is I tell it what connection string, where the database is, what table, and this is customers table. What I want to return in this case is a customer ID, and then I can say contact title is equal to plus, and then in here I'm going to put in e.data.contact title, and then I can say result is equal to that, and then I can say if result is equal to 0, I'm sorry, not equal to 0, and I'll explain this in a moment, then I can say and I'll walk you through this in a moment. Okay, so let me walk you through it line by line. So the first thing I did is I went to contact title and I created this validation XBasic. The next thing I did is that in this code, this is going to run to validate that field. So when the grid submits itself to say, I'm saving this record, it goes, oh, hey, you want to run this little script to do a special validation. Great, no problem. I'll run it for you. And then based on what happens, you can tell me if it worked or not. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm doing a little lookup, and this is, again, this neat little function that basically says, look in this table, give me back whatever matches this filter. So basically I created a filter saying the contact title is equal to what I have already, or what the person inputted in there, and then I have customers and customer ID. So when this lookup happens, it's going to just do a SQL query against the table, and if it finds a customer ID, this result is going to be that customer ID. So I know I found a match, so someone else has that same contact title. But if it comes back, in this case, the result of this is a 0, then I know, well, no, it didn't bring me back a ID, so nobody else has that contact title. So the logic may sound a little bit, but play this back over when we put it on tape. So basically, I use this little thing here to do a little quick SQL query to pull back any IDs of customers who have the same contact title. And if that is not equal to 0, meaning I did find someone with that, then I throw these two little commands. So first I say there is an error, I set that to be true, and then I give it the error text saying the contact title has to be unique. So I can control the feedback to the user saying, why am I not validating this field? And so that's how I would approach that, is you basically just do a lookup, use the what's called a XBasic validation to do that, and you can get very sophisticated. You could do very sophisticated calculations in here. You could do a more extensive database lookup, but I thought this was just a quick and dirty way in which you can do that. So for everybody who wants to do that, take a screen snapshot right now. I think it's Shift Print F9, and I wonder, can you do that in here where you can screenshot and hand it to people? That would be cool. I don't know if you can do that. Let's see. No, webcam. Nah, I don't know how to do that. Be cool. But go ahead and take a quick screenshot or type that down and we'll go from there. So that's how I would approach that problem of determining whether a field in a grid is unique across that whole database. And then if not, generating a new one or giving the person a reason to do that, or a warning that they have to put in something that's unique. Hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I think that did, in fact. Let me just go ahead and paste the screenshot, though, into the window.
Thank you, Dave. That way it'll save a lot of people having to go back
and handouts section there, and it's under the very unoriginal title of code.ping. So you might want to rename that to something more useful.
Yeah.
Right?
By the way, I should have done this. Code is not warranted to actually work. I love that. Have you ever read a UA? It says basically we've sold you this service, but it may not work, and so you can't blame us or sue us or anything like that. But you may have to just double check and make sure this filter is correct here and double check this logic. But that, off the top of my head, I think it should work.
Well, I think that's all the time we have right now for questions. It's now 2 o'clock. We have a bunch that we didn't answer.
First, awesome question.
Yeah, they are great questions. And the one that we
and thanks for sending them ahead of
next,
time.
yeah, what we were going to get to next was how to position stuff into a header panel and a UX control and get things to work out, to space themselves out properly. It's something I've struggled with, but I think we figured out the answer to. But I'm going to send that over to you so we can get to that next week.
Excellent. We'll be prepared.
And the other ones. In the meantime, if you have other questions that you think of, please send them over to guides@alphasoftware.com. And if you give us a day or two, we will have today's session posted over at videos.alphasoftware.com. So thank you, everyone who attended. Thanks for all your great questions, and thank you very much, Dion, for presenting. Hope to see you.
My pleasure.
At a future webinar. Take care, and goodbye.